Welcome, everybody. This is the info session that a number of the interdisciplinary institutes here on campus have organized to talk about the IDF. Just so you know, this is input from our different centers. It's not necessarily from what the graduate school, it does not encompass all the centers, but we want to give you some information about how the IDF works at our centers, and you'll have some time to talk with us. So just so you know, the order of things here is that we will first have a presentation from Karen Ho, who has served on the graduate schools committee that selects the IDFs, and Karen will talk about writing what goes into writing a strong IDF application, and we'll have a little time for Q&A there. And then we'll have 5-minute presentations on the IDF experience at all of our different centers, and anything special to know about any of these centers' applications process. And then we will have breakout rooms, and we will want you to self-select which breakout room that you will go into, and Abby can give a little more detail on how to do that. And then after that, we will you'll have a chance to talk directly in the breakout rooms to center directors. So Abby, unless you want to add something to that, I guess we are ready to go with Professor Karen Ho.
Hi, everyone. Thank you, IAS, and everyone for inviting me. I'm delighted to be here to give you all a little bit of an overview of the IDF process, and especially your application. As Susanna was saying, look at the directions, right? Because every center has a slightly, specific protocol, and the centers, some of the centers here will be talking about it. I'll be talking a little bit more from the graduate school, larger IDF selection committee. So, and I forgot to introduce myself. Hi, I'm Karen Ho, professor in anthropology, interim chair in African Studies, also previous Regis director, and I have served on the IEDF committee in some capacity, for almost 15 years. So, there's too much IDF going on in this head. Okay, so a few quick things. Abby, I don't need the slide for now because I'm realizing that I'm actually going to start in a slightly different frame this time. And I want to give you all a little bit of a sense of the structure of the IDF committee at the graduate level, just to give you all a sense of how to think about your applications, right? So the IDF is a graduate school university level committee that thinks about interdisciplinarity across the colleges. So the graduate school committee will have folks from computer science and the medical school and public health and engineering and education. And, CLA has almost, 30 programs, units, departments, and one CLA representative would count as interdisciplinarity, right? Because it's representative from that particular college or from CLA. So just to give you a sense of the breadth of what constitutes interdisciplinarity at that graduate school committee level. The committee is split into pods, right? So the pods will have 4 people reading, a small subset of your applications. These 4 people, in a sense, will be in charge of whether or not your proposal moves up to the graduate school level. Now, these 4 people are composed of this larger graduate school committee, but they read a subset. Now, the way in which this subset of 4 faculty member are composed is in a similar ilk. You might have one representative from engineering. You might have one representative from College of Biological Sciences. You might have one representative from CFANS, and you might have one representative from the School of Education. And that constitutes the 4 readers you have, right? And so think about what constitutes interdisciplinarity in that sense. Your application will have to somehow be legible to that group right, for it to move on, right? So we can think about other ways of thinking about and constituting this. You could have somebody from public health, somebody from statistics, somebody from chemical engineering, and somebody from plant, soil, and water. And they are reading your application to see if it moves forward. If it does move forward, it goes to the committee where everybody gets to weigh in. But we only get to weigh in oftentimes if they've also sort of, obviously passed this group before. And I'm letting you know this to let you know that there's certain kind of arbitrariness, a lot of luck, right, to how your application gets read, right? Who constitutes these four, et cetera, et cetera. Now, having said that, right, there are a lot of concrete ways that the IDF application process can be apprehended, right? So now I'm going to go into that part of the presentation. It's if you want, you can share the slide. I'm not going to adhere too closely to it because the IDF rubrics have slightly changed. And I will want to, talk to you about that. But, all of this still holds, all of that, that proposal that just was flashed before our eyes. Yeah, thank you. This still holds true. But I want to draw your attention to the graduate school application page, or the IDF application page, where they talk about the rubrics. Now, because of the vast college-wide, really sort of broad-based framing of interdisciplinarity, these rubrics become very important. You will see from the spreadsheet that in the application process that there are how many? 8 categories, right? And so there's a maximum of 39 points you can get from this rubric. This is very important because many of the readers now will actually grade you based on these rubrics. So if you actually closely adhere to these rubrics, it makes your application much more legible, right? Now, not everything in this rubric is within your control. So let's just talk really briefly about the rubric and then the kind of key pieces that are in your control. And the key pieces that are in your control is the majority of the rubric, right? 30 out of the 39 points. So the rubric, the 30 points of that rubric really asks you to think about your project and how you frame it. 9 points of the rubric are dependent on your letters, right? 3 points from your advisor, right? Is your advisor writing you a strong letter? 3 points from your faculty mentor, the faculty mentor that's associated with the center that you want to reside in during your IDF. And 3 points for the center director, institute support. Now, besides your advisor letter, none of these actually have to be long or involved, right? It's a robust paragraph. The faculty mentor letter is barely 1 page. So these are, again, other people are writing these for you, but obviously if you have a robust application, it makes it so that the sort of folks who are writing these letters can really render much more tangible and exciting your application. Okay, so now on to the pieces that are certainly more within your control, the sort of majority of the rubric, which is your own project. Now, it's, the sort of framing sort of depends on, 5 things, right? And probably the most important of those 5 things is interdisciplinarity. Now, as I sort of say in this slide here, in a sense, what interdisciplinary means for the IDF is to allow you to think about what your field is. Now, I want you to suspend the sort of complexity of your own project for just a second, in the sense that we know that your project is always already interdisciplinary, right? Most projects are already disciplinary. But what you have to do for the purposes of this IDF is really to think through how you've been trained in your primary field, right? So for shorthand, let's frame that as A, right? And then to think about what's missing from your training. What's missing from your training? What's missing conceptually? What's missing theoretically? What's missing methodologically, right? What kind of training do you not already, in a sense, have full access to? That's B, right? That's your interdisciplinary juxtaposition. So in a sense, what interdisciplinarity is, right, is that you're being trained, broadly, loosely in A. You're really missing B, right, which is a key catalyst, right? Sets of processes, sets of methodologies, sets of conceptual apparatus that you're going to need to really catalyze your project, right? So by putting A plus B together, which is what you need to get trained, which is why you need the IDF, it will then allow you to generate C. And C is your innovativeness. It's precisely the merging, the putting together, the combining of A and B that will lead to C. You need to make a case for why C is innovative, in the sense that without B, right, you'll never get to C, right? So C is really innovative. Now, the sort of third piece is, what kind of synergies is this center, right, going to bring for you so that you can sort of robustly merge A and B to get to C, right? And that can include why working, under the auspices of a center and as well as your faculty mentor is really crucial. Now, keep in mind that for most of you, this is going to be relatively light touch, right? So meaning that it's not like you're going to meet with a faculty mentor every single week, right? It's not like you're going to hang out in the center director's, lobby space every single day, right? But rather, are you able to sort of absorb and be a sort of a key interlocutor in that space, and that it could be on Zoom, right? It could be in person. The centers will tell you a little bit more about what those expectations are. And that's a pretty, wide framing of what constitutes, that sort of presence. Now, once this happens, you then have to say, what significance will the project then bring to your primary field, right? Once this juxtaposition happens, right? So in combining A plus B that gets to C, how does that then redound onto A, which is your primary field, right? Your field of the most impact. It can also redound onto B, right? But you want to make the case for why this kind of significance redounds onto the field in which you're trained and the field that you're likely to make the most impact in. Right now, that gets a little fuzzy. It doesn't, but I'm just trying to tray a little bit of the flow chart here. And certainly writing style really matters in this kind of very cross-college foursome, right? Your writing style is going to be crucial. When they say no jargon, they really mean no jargon. And in the sense that the kinds of taken for granted assumptions that you might have within 4 to 5 to 10 units or departments within CLA. Those kinds of taken for granted parameters and everyday conversations, that's really not going to fly when somebody from plant, soil, and water is reading your application, right? So really try to unpack some of those shorthands. Now, I say all these things about these rubrics, but I also want to say this. There are readers who might really gravitate towards your writing style, that will sort of grade you high on your rubric because you've really been able to convince them of the magic of your proposal. That happens all the time, right? So I don't want to say, if it doesn't follow this rubric to the T, it doesn't really have a shot. No, I don't want to say that, because the writing style is really crucial to gravitate the reader to really allow them to advocate for you, right? And many times projects move forward that don't necessarily follow these rubrics to a T, but following them into the best way that you can sort of navigate that does put your proposal and give it a little bit of a leg up, given that many of the readers will be called, right, to grade your application according to this rubric and then submit the number, right, that will then serve as a basis of the initial discussions. So those are the, it's okay to remove the slide now. So those are some of the initial thoughts I have with regard to the application. 2 or 3 quick things in terms of very frequently asked questions, and that is in this kind of very cross-college interdisciplinary reading, there are certain kinds of interdisciplinarity that are not legible, right? That you're really going to have to make the case for. So let me give you an example. Many readers, now this can certainly happen across sort of multiple colleges. A reader from, say, okay, I'll say a reader from cultural anthropology on the IDF committee might not necessarily be able to ascertain, right, the differences, say, between a chemical engineering infused PhD project and that from biochemistry, right? They, oh, that's similar. That's reading similar to me, right? Now, somebody from that field might say, no, this is actually really different. This is actually combining training and access and conceptual methodologies that aren't usually brought together, right? So, but if somebody who's in that space doesn't tell me, I might presume what's so new and innovative and interdisciplinary about that. So keep that in mind, right? A reader that's far afield from you might not know that that your framing of sociology and history might actually be that interdisciplinary. They might say, oh, well, it's all the liberal arts. It's similar, right? So you need to make the case and show and describe why you're bringing fields together and the sort of innovativeness of that juxtaposition, right? And that means certainly that you have to stage a little bit of a difference. But in order to sort of show why the sort of innovativeness of that combination, right, you'll need to make that initial frame. So that's sort of one thing I wanted to tell you in terms of initially framing some of your proposals. Should I open it up for questions? While you're thinking about your questions, I have another kind of juxtaposition. Now, there are some projects that one might say fulfills the kind of ideal type of a interdisciplinary doctoral dissertation fellowship framework. And let me just give you an example of that, right? And you'll sort of immediately sort of see this. So let's, a sort of application from the past that I've read is, and that was very legible for the committee, is somebody who was working the space of nursing and or public health, that was working with patients, right, that had suffered some kind of trauma. And they want to work with somebody in literature, right, to really ascertain why and think through the sort of rubrics of a literature, and especially memoir and writing, so that folks might actually engage and write through trauma, right? A very interdisciplinary and very different approaches to navigating trauma. And so they needed to be trained by somebody who, or worked with somebody who was in the literature space. Now you can imagine from a reader who doesn't have that much prior knowledge of these fields goes, wow, somebody in nursing really needs to engage with somebody in literature, right? The key link is navigating and assuaging and ameliorating experience of trauma through multiple disciplines, through multiple methodologies and conceptualizations. Let's bring them together. And why is that? That's significant. That's innovative. So that is an ideal type, right? Not all projects are going to look or feel like that, right? That has a certain kind of legibility in the world, right, of most readers that were going to be reading this. And so to the extent that that is an ideal type, it gives you a sense of, how might you frame ways of thinking about your project's significance and innovation that catch the reader's eye, right? So that you can really sort of showcase the, the significance and the sort of really some of the interesting sparks that you're bringing to your larger project. Happy to take questions.
Remember, there's no dumb question.
Everyone will benefit. Everyone will benefit from
Truly.
all of our goofy questions.
Yeah.
If it were me on a Friday morning, I might be too sleepy to ask a question, so I understand.
Well, I guess hearing no general questions, we can move on to the 5-minute presentations of, oh, okay, here we go. Thank you, Olivia. And that's a great question.
Yes, that is a great question. Now, how now it certainly depends on the two disciplines, but here's two quick things. I oftentimes get the committee often gets applications where across the board, not just in CLA, where their faculty mentor is already on their dissertation committee, right? They've already taken classes with them. They've already asked them to be on their external committee. You can see why that's not disallowed, right? There's no sort of blatant restriction against that. However, it does weaken your proposal relatively because the faculty mentor already serving on your dissertation committee means that you already have access to, right? You're already fully engaging with that interdisciplinary toolkit. So in that sense, right, the kinds of interdisciplinary waters you're already swimming in might not necessarily make for the best IDF application. So I want to sort of say that structurally in terms of the design of the IDF, which is a very particular kind of fellowship, right? It wants to privilege, training and faculty and mentor and student engagements that are not as easy to come by, so to speak. Now, having said that, there are ways of thinking about your application, right, that highlights a particular aspect of a discipline, right, and why you might really necessitate training in an interdisciplinary part of another discipline. So, for example, I once was a IDF mentor to somebody who was in geography. Right now, to the interdisciplinary reader in, I don't know, computer science, that might seem very similar, right? But at the same time, it's open-ended for how you want to craft it into being. So the person I was working with really got a lot of training in a political economic framework with which to understand flows, geographic flows. Now, they were in cultural geography, but they had a very sort of macro approach to thinking about notions of recycling and waste and sort of transnational capital flows in their space. And what they were really missing was a sort of fine-grained ethnographic detail from the bottom up, right? So the way they were able to frame their IDF was not only a methodological distinction, right, from a much more sort of macro world systems perspective, so to speak, to sort of and then needing to work with me to get much more of a micro ethnographic space, but also a very different approach to thinking about this larger social economy, right? So they didn't just bring in method, but also brought in a very different conceptual take on it that was also grounded in highlighting a particular aspect of anthropology and highlighting a particular aspect of geography. Now, This was many years ago. But one could certainly also make the argument that for me as an anthropologist who studies finance and capitalism, right, that I sort of approach these also from a political economic perspective, et cetera. So that could have been highlighted, but it wasn't necessarily focused on as much. So how you frame your application is crucial. And it was a very real take on it, right? But it was just a matter of, you have 2 pages and what did they want to emphasize? Mid-career, yes. So I'm really glad you asked the question. That's actually,
I'm sorry to interrupt you. Can we read the question aloud for the video?
yes, thank you, Abby. Okay, so the second question is, can you please clarify what counts as mid-career PhD students? Does this include ABD students? Yes. Okay, so when we first started the IDF, it really was really year 2, right? Because it's really difficult to get apply for the IDF in year 1. You basically started the university like a month ago, right? And you sort of need to meet a faculty mentor. You need to hang out with a center. It's just all too complicated. But when we first started the IDF, folks who were about to write their dissertation and ABD could also apply, right? And the IDF over time really got configured into, the IDF is now the DDF, right? You're working at the DDF, you're wanting to get your dissertation done, geared towards the DDF. The IDF is more in the formation stages. So the IDF sweet spot, right, is year 2 to year 4, right? That's mid-career. Now, there's tons of exceptions, right? So to give you a sense, a recent IDF application was actually after doing their sort of key research, right? Whether it be archival work, ethnographic work, et cetera, and had come back from the archives, from the field, and were starting to write their dissertation, right? So not only ABD stage, but year 5 plus perhaps. And the way that they wrote their application, right, really struck a chord in that it was precisely after having done a key part of their research that in thinking about how to write their dissertation, they realized that their research had taken them in a slightly different direction than how they were trained, right? And in order to really grapple with 2 or 3 key chapters of their dissertation, right, they actually needed new training or interdisciplinary training to render even more robust their data, right? To render even more robust how they were engaging with the archives, how they were making sense of fieldwork, how they were making sense of their sort of larger findings. And so there's no one point where needing to engage with new training and new framework ends. So you can absolutely make the case. Is it the sweet spot between 2 to 4 years? No, but if you make the case well, you certainly have a shot at it, if that makes sense. Okay. And that how many questions do we have time for? Should I? The next one is from Laura. I understand we first submit our applications to our own department prior to being selected to move forward university-wide. Are there opportunities to incorporate ethics suggestions?
I can handle that one. Your application has to be submitted by your DGS, right? But you don't necessarily know whether you will be going forward until you hear from your center whether, I mean, at least in speaking for the IAS, we usually have more people who want to have an IDF with us than we can accommodate. So we select a few. I think you need to talk to your department about that because every department is going to be different. The department does not actually submit a letter for you because all the letters are, it's your your advisor, your mentor, and the center director. So check with your department what their timing is and whether they will be reading your application over. And I just, Laura asked, given Karen's earlier remarks, does this mean it is not suggested to apply both for the DDF and the IDF at the same time? Indeed, you shouldn't, because the IDF, you have to say, I'm not going to finish until a year after my IDF. So that if you think you're going to defend in the spring of, let me get my years right here, 2026, you are not actually eligible for the IDF. So you have to say, no, spring 2027 is when I'm going to defend.
Can I also say, Susanna, that was exactly right. So, but this is why the application process is a little esoteric. There is no departmental nomination, right? It's actually the centers that actually many, not all centers, but many of the centers that get a lot of applications cannot support all of them. Remember that the center directors actually have to write a support document, right? So if 50 people apply to go through the ICGC or through the IAS or through the Institute on Environment, they can't support 50 students, right? So they have their own internal process. It's a misnomer to say that the department has a nomination form. Everybody, that's just what the form is called. There's no nominating process or selection process at the department level, right? You choose your center, you gather your applications, your department sends it to the graduate school, but there's no departmental nomination. The department head and the DGS has very little to do with this process. So if your department is telling you something differently, tell them to email me because that is incorrect. Also, keep in mind that the IDF was sort of originally designed because many students were not getting the training they necessarily needed within their department. And so the process is designed so that the department actually doesn't control whether or not the students can move forward for an IDF, right? Because their internal departmental committee might not necessarily understand why in this particular student's project, they actually would really need some external and other interdisciplinary faculty mentors, right? The student's application needs to make that full case. Oh, okay, so maybe final question.
Wait, Caitlin, did you have a question or has it been answered?
Yeah, I think just a quick clarifying, and thank you again. This has been really helpful already. Obviously, the IDF serves in a lot of ways of training. We've talked a little bit about, especially from your examples of getting methodological training. How I'm wondering how to necessarily avoid jargon when obviously when you're getting training in a particular methodology, it's obviously pretty jargon filled oftentimes. And so how to kind of strike the balance between providing the application enough details in terms of the methodological training you want without kind of overstepping the jargon line.
Yeah, no, I mean it's an art, right? To navigate that. And I would say you want to aim your audience, right, as a sort of very interested dinner table conversation of, I don't know, 17-year-olds. Right, so you might not be able to explain your project to a 10-year-old, but a 17-year-old you probably could, especially if they're very interested. So really think about that as how do I get my sort of a teenage little sib to understand this project from a different who's really interested in being an aerospace engineer. That might be the sort of the key here. So, but absolutely try it out. Try it on your friends, right? Try it on a friend who might not be in academia, and that could also work as a first draft. But it is absolutely essential to unpack the onion for this application. If you're thinking, if you're needing to parse the sentence yourself, and the sentence is four sentences long, then it's probably not a good IDF sentence.
We are sort of running short on time, but Karen, do you think you can address Nora's question quickly? How can you talk about how one may discuss previous collaboration with the faculty mentor, or the opposite, they have not worked with the mentor at all before?
Okay. So you can imagine during the pandemic why it was really hard for folks to do an IDF, especially if it's a cold call faculty mentor and, you know, they had never had any contact other than perhaps Zoom, and that was also kind of awkward. So this entire process breeds lots of awkwardness. So you're not alone in the weirdness of this. But the faculty who are associated with centers usually have a sense of the IDF, right? That's because they have been socialized into their centers, right? So the faculty associated with IAS, the faculty associated with Institute on the Environment, the faculty associated with the Charles Babbage Institute, they have a sense of, okay, the IDF is coming. I might get some inquiries. Now, you will want to inquire soon. You will let them know when the deadline is, which is, i.e., you'll probably want to sort of make those inquiries now, and set up an initial meeting to see if they're interested and can sort of really sort of engage with your project. And many faculty mentors will be excited about this because the faculty mentor role is actually not that intricate, right? Yes, they have to be excited about your project, but at this point, what the faculty mentor needs to do is understand your project well enough to write 500 words, right? Which is pretty much a page. That's not, you know, the hardest thing in the world. Well, you have to put some legwork into it, yes. Now, if it's somebody you already know, that's fine too. Again, you don't necessarily want them on your dissertation committee, but if somebody you already know and have a rapport with, that's great. And you all can discuss what your hopes and dreams are for thinking about this project at its next stage and why an interdisciplinary you know, sets of conversations and juxtapositions and insights are really going to be crucial for your project. So yeah, I would encourage you to do, you know, either one, you know, sooner rather than later, because the IDF process is very soon, especially for the centers that have their own internal process. It's a pretty early deadline in the semester scheme.
So I think with that, we're going to have to move to presentations from each institute. So let's start with the Charles Babbage Institute.
Thank you very much, Abby and Susanna and IES for organizing this and the incredibly helpful comments by Karen on the process. I'm the director of the Charles Babbage Institute, and we, as you might guess from the photograph behind me, focus on computing and the digital world. We began about 45 years ago as a history center and archives, and we pretty much continue that focus. But in taking over the directorship about 7 years ago, I really pushed it in an interdisciplinary direction. And so we work closely with sociologists and anthropologists. We have a bunch of research fellows that not only come from history, but anthropology, communication, media studies, geography, many different disciplines. And those are also disciplines that we've had IDFs in the past. And so as an institute, we put on programming, symposia, we publish, we have a journal, we edit, we engage in education, and I'm in the History of Science, Technology, and Medicine graduate program as a faculty member. And we also are very active in doing oral histories. And so one thing that past IDFs have found useful with CBI, and certainly the unique thing that we bring is we are the leading archive in the world to study the history of computing, software, and networking, to study the digital world and its past. It's an archive of about 7,000 linear feet of materials. So if you stacked it up, it would be more than a mile in length. we have 320 different collections. So pretty much any topic, whether it be studying artificial intelligence or the internet or platforms or early personal computing or gaming or many different topics, we have material in our archives. We've also conducted oral histories in a number of these areas. And along with kind of the interdisciplinary push, I've also been very, very active in networking and using social networks to network, but also I travel a lot. I'm constantly meeting people and building CBI's networks. So we're a small institute, but I have a lot of connections to people in many different fields, from computer science and information science to the social sciences, humanities, and arts, involved with kind of computing in the digital world. So that has been helpful to IDFs in the past. In terms of deadlines, I like for students to make first contact at least 2 weeks prior to the IDF deadline, and for us to have had either an in-person or Zoom meeting by that point, and then 10 days before that IDF deadline to send me a draft proposal for me to look over before the final proposal goes in. In terms of, I am the one faculty member at the Charles Babbage Institute, but we have an affiliated faculty member, Long Hong Tin, who's a colleague in the history of computing, the history of science, technology, and medicine program, and she has been a faculty mentor as well for projects. Her focus is more on East Asian computing, and she's just publishing a book on history of computing in Taiwan. The only work I've done on computing in Asia is India. So, but we are kind of the two faculty members, and then we have a whole bunch of fellows, both at the senior level and doctoral fellows from around the nation, that are connected to us, and that provides a rich network for conversations with a number of different scholars, and we are very active in trying to facilitate that. So I think I'm about at time, but if you're doing a project that's studying some aspect of the digital world, usually history and archival study can greatly add to the nuance and understanding of contemporary topics. We've worked not only with a bunch of students throughout CLA, but also the Carlson School of Management, Humphrey School of Public Policy, and I've also worked with some computer science students. So all in there.
Mary, do you want to jump in now for INE? Thank you.
Oh, Barry, I think you're muted.
There we go. Can you hear me now? Apologies about that. I was too quick with my mouse back and forth. Hello, everyone. I'm delighted to, can someone say that they can hear me? Just quick. Can you hear me?
Yeah, yes.
Okay, great, good. Okay, thank you. So my name's Mary Hahnemann, and I'm here to represent the Institute on the Environment. We call ourselves INE as well. And we have a number of staff, as well as we also have students that are part of our programs, as well as who are on staff. Then we also have a broad number of affiliates across the University of Minnesota system, across all 5 campuses. And I'm mentioning this because there may be some people that you know. These are our newest affiliates as of this summer, but on our website, we have an extensive list of all of our affiliates in different categories, for fellows to associates. as well as educators. And so if you're interested in getting to know a little bit more about who is part of the INE community, I encourage you to check that out on our website. Just to tell you a little bit about the way that INE does our work. This is our new theory of change that's just being shared as part of our new strategic plan. But you can see it's a little busy, but basically trying to take more of an ecological, a visual approach to thinking about how we try to do our work. And that is really in kind of three core areas, and in doing, if you look at the kind of the base of the plants here, interdisciplinary research. We also have a group that works on public interest communications, and the team that I'm part of is around education and leadership, kind of learning development. And we do have a lot of cohorts and network building. I really appreciated Jeffrey's strong point about the importance of connections and those networks, and how that really makes a difference in scholarship. And wanted to highlight a couple of the recent IDF fellows that we have, just for you to get a sense of some of the different types of scholars that we've supported in their IDF fellowship. Sean Dorr just wrapped up his working with a background in computer science, but working on integrating design justice principles in ecological forecasting. We are grateful to have him part of our community past year. And then also another example I thought I'd offer is Beza Tuga, who comes with a background of chemistry and worked with Kathy Jordan on looking at trying to alleviate global food insecurity. So those are a couple of the examples. A little bit about our process and support. We do have, and if it's helpful to folks, the QR code is here, will take you to the same Z link that'll have a little bit more information if you're interested in it. You're also welcome to reach out to me if you have questions. But we do have a small amount of funding available to support research funding if you have something that you need specific to your research project. We also really welcome our IDF fellows to work in our space and really build connections across our programs and personnel, if that's helpful for your area of research and your own professional development. And has been mentioned, we do have a deadline that's prior to the IDF deadline, and we'd like to hear from you by the 18th of October, so just in a few weeks. And I wanted to share a few tips for success. I really appreciate all that Karen presented earlier. And I think for us, we find it really important for success to have strong letters. And in order to build those strong letters, we really suggest that you try to reach out to us as soon as possible and be clear about why INE is the right center for your IDF, trying to be as specific as possible. And by the 18th, we don't expect you to have everything finalized. We really want to see a draft, and so we can see, is this the right place for you, and how we could support you in your application. I also wanted to, and I forgot to start my timer to see if I'm still under 5 minutes, but I'll be brief. Another unit that we work really closely with, and I'm actually support them for the student engagement, is the University of Minnesota's Extension Regional Sustainable Development Partnerships, which is another center that has hosted IDF fellows. Our mission is really to advance the work around the state outside of the metro area through community-based research and scholarship. So we work a lot around the state. We have 4 different areas. This is the regional partnerships, working at ag and food systems, natural resources, resilient communities, and clean energy. So if these are areas that are of interest to you, you may consider reaching out both to INE and RSDP and see if there might be a good fit. We do collaborate really closely together on community-based research around the state. So if you have questions, my colleague Melissa Kenny, who directs our research and knowledge initiatives, also welcomes questions. And then this is the QR code again for that page on our website that shows who to contact. But thanks for the time, and I'll look forward to hearing from anyone that has questions.
Mao, I will answer your question. Can we submit applications to more than one center, or is that discouraged? You can do that, but please let each center know. We had one situation a few years ago where somebody did that, was accepted by both centers, and we're like, wait, what? So just give us a heads up. Or even better, check with your center if it is okay before you do that.
Hi, everybody. I'm Karen Brown, and I direct the Interdisciplinary Center for the Study of Global Change, which is generally called ICGC. And I'll tell you a little bit about ICGC and then about how the IDFs work there. So ICGC is a campus-wide center, and we're focused on global social justice, broadly defined. And we have a wonderful cross-cultural community of students, faculty, and visiting scholars whose research, teaching, and other collaborative activities are focused on this general theme. We have a few key themes that define the research and education that happens at ICGC, and you see them here. And these are very broad themes, and we don't expect anyone to fit exactly in these themes, but these are the broad currents of thought that are happening in our academic work. And just to give you an example, folks work in all different areas that are cross-cutting these themes. So questions of gender power and inequality, questions of arts and social change and conflict, et cetera. These are all cross-cutting themes that folks have worked in their research with ICGC. So what does the ICGC community look like that you'd be joining as an IDF? We have about 80 affiliated faculty members across the university in 6 different colleges and schools. And these are the folks who teach our courses and speak on their research and help to run our research activities. So you would have connections with a number of those faculty as an IDF. We also currently have 60 graduate fellows and 18 master's degree students from more than 20 departments across the university. Our core program is our ICGC Scholars Fellowship program, which you might be familiar with. And so IDFs join into that fellowship community as part of the center. We also have a wonderful and extensive alumni network that you could have access to that can be helpful as you're doing field research or visiting other institutions. ICGC has a few formal programs and activities. We have a freestanding graduate minor in development studies and social change. We have a master's in international development studies. We have a Friday colloquium talk series, and we invite all of our IDFs to present their research in that series. We also host the South Asia Seminar Series and a set of interdisciplinary research circles that IDFs can draw upon. So as an IDF at ICGC, what would your time with us look like? Well, I mentioned that we have a wonderful community of ICGC scholars, graduate students, and faculty. We also each year have a few other visiting scholars and residents at ICGC. Sometimes they're visiting from our partner school, the University of the Western Cape in South Africa. Sometimes they're recent graduates or postdocs, and sometimes they are faculty who come and want a residency at Minnesota who are coming from another institution on sabbatical or research leave. So you will join a small community of other visiting scholars at ICGC as well. We invite our IDFs to participate in all of our events and activities as they are of interest to you. We particularly invite you to participate in our Friday colloquium talk series because that's really the place each week when folks come together and you can meet others in the community. And we invite IDFs to present their research in that colloquium talk series at some point during the IDF year. We offer our IDFs a workspace, a desk in the center, a computer that you can use as much or as little as you want. We have had IDFs who come in every day and work there, and we have others who only come in on Fridays for the talk series. So that's really up to you, but it's a space that you have as your own to work in the center and connect with others. We provide some professional development funding. We provide $2,500 for each IDF to use toward research expenses, conference travel expenses, et cetera. And the most important thing is really to be part of what is really a wonderful and vibrant academic community at ICGC. In terms of our process, we have an October 13th internal deadline. We ask you to submit your materials then. And if you have, a couple things that aren't fully finalized, just let us know that. We can work around that. If you haven't already spoken with us about the IDF, I invite you to reach out to me, kbt@umn.edu. To set up an appointment so we can talk further about how your project might be a fit with ICGC. and who you're thinking about for a faculty mentor. We're happy to help with that as well. So you can take a look at our website, icgc.umn.edu. There's a page on student fellowships there where you find information on the IDFs and how to apply through ICGC. So I look forward to speaking with any of you if you have specific questions later.
Hi, everyone. Let's see, here I go with my slides. Good to see you all. My name is Lindsay Fabian. I am representing two centers today, the Life Course Center and the Minnesota Population Center. Both are housed within an umbrella organization called the Institute for Social Research and Data Innovation. First, I'll start with the Life Course Center. This is a NIA, National Institute of Aging, funded research center where we do interdisciplinary research all about the course of the life course. So how big population data can look at changes in life stages and history and how that impacts where people live, work, play, and family. We have a couple of key research themes. You can see them on your screen here. We have a number of faculty and research staff, student and postdoc members at the Life Course Center, and we engage with them in this type of research across these three themes. If you're interested, here are a couple of past IDFs. You can see kind of the type of research that they did with us. So Zhao Fan from Speech and Language did something about stuttering and how that impacts, influence people's emotional states. And JMag, who's a PhD student in health policy, looked at the implications of policing in early adolescence. All right, let me jump to the Minnesota Population Center, and then I'll go back to talk about how IDFs work embedded in both of these two centers. So the Minnesota Population Center uses a demographic lens to study health and well-being and human environment interactions using big data sets. So we do high quality research with population-based data in an interdisciplinary setting. We also have research themes that are funded by the National Institutes of Health that are focused on these 5 areas here. And to give a sample of some past IDFs who've worked with the Minnesota Population Center, you can see Adam here from the History of Medicine. He looked at brain trauma. And Solveig from Biostatistics used health records to look at social identities. And Rania from Anthropology researched global humanitarianism around refugees and gender and conflict. So really vast and broad topics, and they all fit within the Minnesota Population Center umbrella of research themes. We love IDFs because they bring such a wealth of information and a different perspective to our centers. So they as well are embedded in our intellectual environment. We encourage them to come to all of our weekly events. We have a Monday lunchtime seminar series and a Friday professional development workshop. They are welcomed and encouraged to come into the office and given an office space with a computer and all the software that they need. And we provide $2,500 for travel and research. We also fully integrate our IDFs with our 2 training programs. We run a population studies and a population health training program for PhD students, and IDFs are integrated into that training program. So they really get to be with a cohort with other trainees working in this interdisciplinary space. Like I said, we have Monday seminars, Friday workshops, and many opportunities throughout the year to meet one-on-one with leading population studies and life course researchers from around the United States and the world. Here are the 2 email addresses. If you are interested in working with us, please send us an email to indicate your interest and I will get back to you. We do have an internal deadline of October 14th, and we probably will go back and forth with you a little bit of framing and making your application that much better between that October 14th date and the actual deadline. So we have a little committee to decide who we will endorse. So please reach out early if you haven't, and I can help connect you with a mentor and tell you a little bit more about our process. And then we work to get the letters ready to go to the graduate school by the deadline. Again, I'm Lindsay. Here's my email, and here are the email addresses for our centers. And I would love to chat with you more if you're interested in working with us. Thanks so much.
All right. Well, hello. I realize that I actually didn't introduce myself before. I'm Susanna Smith, and I'm the acting director of the Institute for Advanced Study. And I do want to say that the IAS is a really vibrant place, and I'm on the road right now and don't have control over my situation here, so that's why everything looks so dank. But trust me, IAS is a great place to be. The IAS is one of the UU's system-wide interdisciplinary center. We, unlike the other centers that have been presenting today, we don't have a central theme or subject, but we do encourage and support collaborative and interdisciplinary work. Our current priorities are advocating for racial and social justice, strengthening community engagement, expanding international partnerships, and creating pathways for institutional transformation. But we really do have people that are working on a large variety of topics beyond those. So our residential fellows, we have a residential fellows program, and the IDFs are fully integrated into that. Every semester we have up to 12 fellows in residence in Northrop. These are usually, we usually have 6 faculty fellows, a community fellow, however many IDFs the graduate school deigns to allow us to have, and occasionally postdocs or visiting scholars from various places. The IDFs are completely integrated into this fellows program. Our IDFs are assigned an office or a open workspace, depending usually on preference. In Northrop, you get a desktop computer if you need one. We give you professional development funds of $2,500. And most importantly, we provide a supportive intellectual and developmental community, if you will. We have a weekly work in process seminar. This is over lunch. We usually meet for an hour and a half to 2 hours. Each semester, every one of our fellows presents their work in process. These sessions are incredibly useful, not only for developing your own work, but for also participating in the development of the other fellows' work. And many, many times our fellows have said that they fully expected to get a lot of good feedback, but they didn't realize how incredibly useful it would be to hear about the other work that that the other fellows were doing. And you know, you have your mentor, right? But the cool thing at the IAS is that you end up with a whole room full of mentors, because all the other people that are there, the faculty fellows, the community fellows, and the IAS staff, all of whom have amazing, deep experience and knowledge. So it's a really useful place to be for that. What we expect from our fellows is first in-person participation. Now, during COVID, obviously everything was remote, and then in the few years since we've come back to campus, we've been working on a hybrid sort of situation to allow for people who had to get out and do their field work. They had to go out and do, go to do archival work. Hybrid presentations are the worst of all worlds, and we really want to build that community by having people in person. So that is to say, if you expect to be doing field work, archival work, anything off-site, during your during the IDF year, then the IS is not going to be the place for you because we really want you to be here. Granted, people will sometimes miss a week or two, you know, they're off on doing a conference or something. That's okay. So we do expect in-person participation, which includes the weekly seminars and also attending our public events, which are about every other week. Next year, our Injustice series will focus on the theme of human in the data. Mentors can be any faculty person that has worked with the IIS before. We have an extensive list that is just been updated, and we'll be posting that next week. Our internal deadline is October 14th, and we can give you more details with the session, with the breakout room session, which, golly, we have 20 minutes now. So what I would like to do now is move you into breakout rooms. So please self-select which breakout room you want to enter.